Welcome to Dead Genre Chronicles, the book club style podcast about a genre of games that's as dead as 2015. Happy New Year. Every month, DGC will be playing through a JRPG decided on by the host, and we invite you to play along and send us your questions and thoughts on it. Unfortunately, we didn't get any of those this month. Grr. I'm your host, Devin, and with me I have my co-hosts, Leroy.
Hi.
And Becky.
Hi.
So, on this episode, we're going to be talking about The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, which is a PC JRPG from 2004 that got ported to PSP and then localized into English in 2011, but got re-released on Steam in 2014 with a bunch of improvements, including all the additions from the PSP version. But before we get started properly, I'd like to take a moment to read an article about this game from this past year, slightly edited for brevity and levity.
I like that you can't even get to the first of your jokes with this. Devin, tell us about this article. Go.
This is an article on Kotaku.com by one Jason Schreier. There have been many JRPGs released over the past 5 years, and many of them are great. Only one can be safely labeled the best. Said JRPG is called Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, and despite the awfully generic title, it's a stellar game, one that calls back to SNES and PS1 classics, but ditches the obsolete nuisances that marred those games. Like other recent games inspired by the 90s, Shovel Knight, Pillars of Eternity, etc., Trails in the Sky plays less like an old-school game and more like how we remember an old-school game, full of life and joy and charm. There are no random encounters. All enemies are visible on the battlefield before you attack them, just like Tales of Symphonia, which was a year before it. You can play every non-boss battle with a 100% success rating, just like Tales of Symphonia. Trails is full of player-friendly tweaks like that. If you die in battle, for example, you won't lose much progress because you can just start again right from the top without missing a beat. The battle system is quite good, reminiscent of Grandia in that it's turn-based, but both your turn order and battlefield positioning play an important roles in the outcome of every fight. You'll see a large stack of portraits in the top left corner representing when each of your allies and opponents will take their turns, just like Final Fantasy X. To beat challenging bosses, you can use this to your advantage by casting spells that delay opponents and speed up your friends, just like Final Fantasy X. It's been a solid decade for JRPGs so far, don't get me wrong. Other contenders for Best of the Decade include Ni no Kuni, Bravely Default, Radiant Historia, and The Last Story. Trails in the Sky beats them all. Or what if it didn't come out in 2004, 11 years before this article was posted, invalidating any possible correct way to interpret that award. Thank you, Jason Schreier. You, like most of Kotaku, are good at facts.
That was basically a forum post.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I have to say about it.
That does say a lot about how JRPGs get reported on in the West.
And he had a follow-up one this month that called Trails of Cold Steel is basically Suikoden meets Persona. So, yeah.
Those are two things that don't meet in very many places.
I think it does have social links this time, so I mean, at least it's easy to make the Persona.
Like, the first paragraph is, take a dash of Suikoden's world building, add some Grandia-style combat. He really likes Grandia. Stir it all in with the setting and social links of Persona. No, and bam, you've got Trails of Cold Steel. Which is not... I didn't know Persona was set in fucking Liberl. Liberl. How the fuck do you say that word?
I think Persona is pretty similar to Trails in the Sky, just in how much text is delivered and how everything stops constantly for these characters to talk to each other, which not a lot of JRPGs do. Yeah. So I think formally, at least, Persona comparison stands strong. I have no idea if Suikoden has the world building of Trails does.
That's kind of what it's known for. That franchise is this big, like, sprawling medieval fantasy world. But Trails isn't big and sprawling.
I think Trails. This one game is like the whole series of Trails is definitely big and sprawling because this is like the sixth. This is the sixth game, I think, in the same continuous world.
Also, like the 8th that's all concurrent. Like, there's this Trails in the Sky trilogy, and then also Ao and, what was the other one? Oh, it's right here. Zero and Ao no Kiseki, which aren't in English, the Crossbell State. And then Arc 3 is just the Cold Steel, and that's... all of those are kind of happening in the same kind of deal.
I do selfishly wish I could go through this series from the beginning, and then play Trails in the Sky, and then, have that whole, whatever, insane historical context.
Yeah.
But, I mean, most people played Trails in the Sky first in the West.
And we've seen where that gets us to.
Yes. The best JRPG of the decade it's not in.
Yeah. So, we should probably start, really, by saying that I had the complete opposite experience of this game to you two, in that I really didn't enjoy 42 of the 42 and a half hours that I spent playing this game. And
42.
It might have been 41 of the 42 and a half hours. I don't know. The last level's alright. But there were, I nearly gave up halfway through. There were times where I was so mad I almost broke my controller. I hated it. So I'm going to have a very different read on a lot of things. And some of that is very subjective and personal. And some of it is ways in which I think the game just didn't hang together for me. Lots of different aspects to it as well. It's not just that there was one particular part of the game that pissed me off. Like in Resonance of Fate, we all agreed the padding pissed us off.
Yeah.
In this, for every element of the game, there was something about it that put me on edge or made me uncomfortable or just didn't work for me. So there might be a few controversies coming up, folks.
We're starting the drama early in our podcast career.
Well, I mean, we started out by ripping on Kotaku, so
like anyone who actually reads Kotaku is going to listen to this.
That's a drama, Devin.
Yeah, I'm calling you out, Jason Schreier. You have shitty info.
We have a beef now with Kotaku.
I think we all had individualized beefs, but now I've consolidated it.
Let's talk about the game.
Let's. Do you have a point on which you would like to start?
Well, okay, so the thing I heard before playing this game, the kind of hype about it, was that it does this really thorough job of bringing its world to life. That was kind of the big point of the Schreier article. It was something you talked about it a bit, that and all this stuff about the translation for second chapter taking so long because there was so much information in it. Kind of the buzz about this game was that it does a lot to bring its world to life, which in practice means that every NPC has twice as much text. And that was where it all started to go wrong for me. Because what I felt was that, so a JRPG town is an abstraction. Yeah? It's a simplified representation of a human settlement. You have a couple of shops that will indicate something about the economy. You have a few characters who represent the administration of the town and how the town relates to the world and progresses through history. And then you have kind of people in the street who are just an abstraction of the Vox Populi. They're not really characters. They're conveying to you just what the concerns and the mood of the people of this town are. But in this game, what I found was the attempt to turn those kind of basically walking signposts into characters strained the abstraction to a point that actually kind of made my skin crawl, in that you've got all these entities that exist purely to deliver text to the player. They don't do anything else, but the game is trying to present them as if they're humans, individual, specific human beings. And I think that was probably the first thing that set my teeth on edge.
I was just gonna add, because of that format, like, they don't have any barriers like real people do, even though they're trying to be, developed as characters, but they don't get to act as characters. They just get to act as devices for you to manipulate in the RPG structure.
That's a really good point, and it's a few things that I would have liked to have seen. Characters you can't talk to is the obvious one. Characters who are just in a hurry and don't have time for you, or characters who don't seem so glad to see everybody here. Just kind of it gives you their text. Sorry,
I was just realized. Sorry, you can keep going.
And the other thing is, you can go into almost every door you see opens, and you can go inside unchallenged. Particularly private residences. Every town has like a number of extra houses that are just there to be a person's house, but you can walk in, and nobody ever tells you. It's rude to walk in without knocking. Nobody ever tells you. Nobody ever requires you to knock, and even people in their own homes, standing in their kitchen, clearly like doing the washing up or whatever, will turn and they'll deliver their text to you, which won't be, sorry, I'm busy, I'm doing the dishes. It'll be, I'm worried about my husband. I had a fight with the neighbour. It's something that's quite personal that they're really open about for your benefit. And like the other game I've been playing or thinking a lot about this month is FF12, because I did the mini episode on it. Please check that out. And FF12 does all these things that I'm now listing, one way or another. So there was a real contrast there between what I was expecting the game to do and what it ended up doing. And what it ended up doing made me feel a bit weird.
That's, I didn't have the same feelings, but that's like half of my mind of parts of the game I really didn't like was just... I jokingly referred to this game as an ASMR JRPG because not only does every NPC act just completely and utterly polite to you personally, but even when you do story developments, every single story character is just always bubbly, outgoing, and just incredibly positive and happy, overwhelmingly happy. And this, Liberl is a post-war country. They're kind of in a recession, but you never really feel that. You never see that. There's no evidence of the politics in the world, because instead the game is like super laser focused and just being very relaxing, very uplifting to you as a player, which is how it's actually not convincing as a fiction. And so I honestly found the NPC dialogue rather pointless compared to like how it was hyped up, how everyone, all these people are like RJ was, or I'm so sorry, Becky.
That's all right. It happens.
Yeah, like Becky was saying that the people are saying these NPCs were they like sew the world together. They bring it all, bring it into a cohesive fiction. But really, they talk about pointless things about their own arcs, and they aren't very relevant to the whole world and the whole things they're doing. And so I never felt a desire to talk to these NPCs besides the first time when I entered a town. And they never really have interesting things to say. Even Final Fantasy VII has probably more interesting NPCs than Trails in the Sky ever did.
I kind of disagree with the whole thrust of what you're saying, and it's mainly because often it's not so much they're talking to you as talking to themselves, and you're overhearing them talking to themselves. Like, it really, unless they go, oh hey, your bracer is cool, that's one thing, but a lot of them are just like worrying about their own stuff, and the people in general aren't really that interesting, but they exist in the world and they're all worried about themselves.
I mean, I understand that, but then it starts to feel like the Golden Sun mind reading Psynergy, but it's just all the dialogue in the whole game.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to say, well, this is what you're overhearing, then I think that becomes a different kind of it reflects a different kind of invasiveness problem. Because the problem I had with the interpretation of how NPCs are working that I was working with, the problem is that everything's too welcoming. Whereas if you read this as you're overhearing people, the problem becomes, well, you're permitted too much. That kind of reinterprets your access to the space as being unwelcome but unnoticed, rather than welcome and unchallenged. And that is a different kind of, also quite uncomfortable relationship to the world. Like, it doesn't feel... There's still something kind of special about the characters you're controlling just because you're controlling them. And, like, you can have a game like that, but I feel like that's antithetical to having a world that is a complete and lifelike world in its own right. You know, if you want to have, there's something special about these characters because they're the player characters, that works against this world is a complete, cohesive world.
I don't agree that it's specifically because they're the player characters. I think it's because they're bracers and they're supposed to be basically freelance, well, not freelance, but like half mercenary detectives. They're private eyes, and they're trying to keep an eye out for clues and signs of trouble and stuff. So I can understand why you're uncomfortable, but I think it's an okay thing for the whole profession of bracer that they're trying to make the focal point of this game.
I don't know if I think that fits with the characters, though. Like, because, okay, in a sense they are private investigators, but they're not kind of sneaky, noirish private investigators. There's nothing sneaky and noirish about this game.
Yeah, I never really said there was, but when your job is to pay attention to potential trouble and you're moving from town to town like that, you listen to people and conversations happen and you pick up on stuff.
I think it's kind of a contradiction, not to say that it's not cohesive, because Trails in the Sky is definitely cohesively relaxing. It's always, like I said, really focused on feeling very good and positive, but I don't really feel like that makes a cohesive world of fiction where, like, even when characters are mourning, they always seem to be really positive about it, and there's never really any slip-ups in the NPC dialogue or in the story dialogue where, like, if there is any angst at all, it's only from major characters and the major plot, and everything underneath that is really one note, I felt.
Well, even there's not a whole lot of kind of explicit angst among the main cast. Even at the start of the game, when Estelle and Joshua's dad goes missing in this presumed airship accident, like, there's a moment where, like, Joshua makes dinner and Estelle goes up to her room and Joshua comes up to get her to say dinner's ready, and Estelle's like, "Oh, you eat without me," and it's briefly played as if she might be kind of in mourning or needing a moment to herself. But then when she actually comes out, it's not that. She's been busy packing for their inevitable adventure to go and get it. There's basically no moment taken at all for them to be worried or afraid or to have an earnest negative emotion.
And yeah, that's true, but that's also where Estelle actually fits the, like, I don't think the positivity is necessarily something I like, but Estelle is so strong. She fits right in with the kind of world Trails in the Sky is. And I mean, Estelle really is, she's a shonen protagonist. Nothing gets her down, and she's always going to try her best to get right back up and just be positive about everything. But I think Joshua does enough rooting for the both of them.
Well, except that
he rarely externalizes it, but I can feel the tension. I felt the tension throughout the whole game. At least I did.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of didn't feel it constantly enough, partly because the kind of bucolic spirit of the whole thing did get in the way of giving the characters any space. Like, there are these hints every now and then, because there are these reminders that there are big secrets about Joshua's past. But mostly I found those annoying, because I was like, if you're such an ideal heroic character, Joshua, you should be sharing some of this information that's clearly relevant in some way.
Except he's not ever portrayed as perfect or
that's
heroic.
The catch. Joshua never admits to being perfect or heroic. It's only everyone else who perceives him that way.
And just because he's really good at following orders, because he was, spoilers, he was brainwashed to do shit like that. It's just...
Well, I think this is the kind of heart of the emotional disagreement that we have over this game, is whether the game is fair between its protagonists or not. And I really felt that it wasn't. I felt that the way scenes were written and constructed, there was this constant comparison of Joshua is the ideal and is what everybody wants a young bracer to be, and Estelle is kind of lacking, and her flaws are not made up. Like, they don't acknowledge her strengths in the way that they acknowledge her flaws. Attention is paid to her flaws and not to her strengths very consistently through the game.
That's very true, and I think that's actually, to me, that's what makes the private moments between Joshua and Estelle very strong to me, which are the highlights of the game. That's what all the game is ramping up for, is the relationship between Joshua and Estelle. And that's why so much of the dialogue, really fluff, kind of just fillerish, constant barrages of dialogue, is to just like establish that these two have a special relationship. Sure, it's not sure if it's romantic or not, but that's what makes their private moments so critical to me, is because Estelle is not given the respect she deserves at all, but Joshua doesn't feel like the respect he gets is earned ever, and he looks up to Estelle as kind of unhealthy. He looks up to Estelle as just like as kind of like his definition of perfection, and he doesn't emote very well, but he's obviously leaning on Estelle. And he praises Estelle in his own ways, although he's absorbing all of that for himself when he's not like emoting, when he's putting up his facade, when he's being
I guess like well, like, joking aside, I hadn't considered it that way, and that's fair, but I'm still frustrated at the extent to which he won't back Estelle up in public. Like, he'll be there for her when they're in private, but as soon as there's a conflict between Estelle and any authority figure, he won't back her up. And I know that there are spoiler reasons for that relate to the plot of Game 2 now, because the end of this game, there's a scene that reveals what the plot of Game 2 is going to be, and it explains Joshua's behaviour very well, but it's literally the last half hour of the game, if that.
Yeah.
And I don't feel obliged to take into account stuff that only happens after 40 hours in developing an understanding of what happens in those 40 hours.
I honestly don't think the reveal is very... I mean, it was impactful, but it wasn't very strong. I empathized with Joshua, and I related to him, so I was like really reading to his character, and I picked up on a lot of things. So when the reveal came, I wasn't really surprised. But yeah, the narrative would have definitely benefited a lot more from there being a more awareness of Joshua's faults in the story, instead of just having him this like platonic ideal of a man, I guess.
Well, a young bracer.
A young bracer, sure. It's a young man.
Yeah, and it's not even that the game has to give a literally equal number of compliments to Estelle that it gives to Joshua or anything. Just a bit more nuance. I felt that there was kind of one way that Estelle was referred to, all the kind of authority figures basically engage with Estelle the same way, basically engage with Joshua the same way, and it was kind of the monotony of it that made me slip from thinking of each of these individual characters having an opinion to the writer clearly has this opinion.
Yeah, and I kept thinking of shonen manga because that was my basis of thinking about this game, because of the way arcs work and how they're self-contained stories that impact the larger story arc, but they kind of only reflect on themselves. And so I viewed Estelle as pretty much a Naruto, and so I asked myself, would Naruto be treated like this in these situations? And empathetically, yes, Naruto would be treated the same as Estelle in any of those situations.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good way of putting it, because I would literally never sit and watch a Naruto episode.
Yeah, I mean, that's
because it would put me in the same kind of mood that this game did.
It is frustrating, but Estelle is honestly a much better character than Naruto. But she is that very modern shonen protagonist and it's very rare for a girl to be this kind of character archetype. But yeah, I wish she stuck up for herself. I wish the game wasn't written completely in that fashion, but I think Estelle does grow along the process of the game, and it justifies itself a little bit, but probably not enough.
I don't know, like if I hadn't got to the end of the game and we'd recorded this cast with me having chucked the thing into the sea a week ago, which nearly happened, like, my response would have been much angrier about this. I mean that quite, yeah. Not just seriously, but also apologetically. I think that might well have been unfair. But I got to the end of the game, and I kind of, seeing what they were setting up for, and the end of the game is very, very clear about what they're setting up for. It's like, okay, I recognise the validity of the project of setting up for that thing, but combining it with this game didn't work for me. Like, the bits of this game that are this game, rather than the prologue for second chapter, get in the way of the bits that are the prologue for second chapter, which looks like it's going to be a much more earnest game.
Yeah.
I don't know about stronger, but because I think this game does have strengths, but I think they interfere destructively with the strengths that are promised in second chapter.
I think I'm just gonna guess too, because I have no idea about the series, but I'm going to assume it's kind of a formal experiment at this point, because I've played the very first Legend of Hero games, and it's very straightforward. It's like the same kind of world as Trails in the Sky, but there's no tricks to it. There's no even interesting characters to it. It's just a prince fights his uncle for control of his kingdom, and it's the most Fire Emblem story I've ever played in a basic JRPG. And so I'm going to assume at this point they're trying to experiment and do more of a character study with their tried and true formula, and it would have worked a lot better once again if you were more aware of what they were examining with Joshua, because it's a messy reveal. And yeah,
well, it's a very sudden reveal. Like, it goes very quickly from one mode to the other.
Yes,
and like suddenly now we're doing plot stuff, and that was a pattern that I found through the game. Each chapter has the first, I guess, 2/3 you're doing this chapter's story. And then you get to the point where this chapter's story has reached its dramatic peak. And then there's the final third of the chapter is completely switch gears and do the serious overarching plot stuff. And never really felt that the two were integrated. There's always this very clear shift from bucolic kids go on an adventure story to dramatic JRPG fate of the world stuff.
That's also like a shonen manga though, where the start of it is always kind of, it's like unwinding. There's no tension because the characters are goofing off, talking to each other, and they're setting up whatever the setting until something happens, and then it tonally shifts. You can find that in Hunter x Hunter and Naruto. And so I kept seeing that over and over. I had another thing I was going to say, but I cannot remember it at all.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that kind of that relationship to shonen manga, because I'm not a big shonen manga person really. But yeah, I can see what they were going for.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, clearly you can tell all of Joshua's dialogue is written with knowledge of the end twist in mind, that he is... the end twist is that Joshua was raised to be pretty much an assassin from a very young age, and he is traumatized by it. He has PTSD throughout the whole game, but they write it, they try to keep their twist themselves so badly that Joshua barely ever emotes, and yeah, so there's a lot of... you can't make an effective character study without studying up what this character is. That's what I'm going to end on.
It's also like there are a handful of very, very small hints of the reveal, but they're so small. They all involve one particular character, and they're so small that when that character showed up at the end, it was like, oh, I'd completely forgotten you existed.
It's just barely enough foreshadowing, so it's not Persona 4, so it's not like, what? That wasn't even in this game, but it's still not enough to really feel justified. I found the twist with, I don't remember his name anymore, Alva? That was the most tonal shift for me in the game, because suddenly, before that, Trail's plot was very measured, political but straightforward, and then suddenly we have something vaguely supernatural and vaguely omniscient just confronting you and then leaving, and I was like, well, okay.
Well, that's very clearly the final shift between, we have now dispensed with all of the Trails in the Sky first chapter stuff, and now we are going to do the second chapter stuff.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, and kind of, that's the point where you get the flashback sequence as well. You get a flashback sequence that gives you a potted version of Joshua's past. And I think that's the first time within the game that anything like a flashback sequence has been referred to. It's certainly the first time that one's been rendered in, like, art rather than an in-world cutscene.
Nope.
Isn't it?
First there was, I believe... Yeah, no. The Queen tells Estelle and Joshua.
Oh, right. You're talking about in this game? I thought couldn't follow the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Estelle also talks about the death of her mom, it's also delivered like that.
Yeah.
Oh god, yeah, sorry, I'd forgotten that one.
And this is just kind of unrelated aside, but like, the most normative character to Estelle is her father, Cassius. The character who keeps kind of pushing to Estelle that she should be more like a lady is her own father, which, to its own credit, which honestly, it reads kind of just like retrograde Japanese jokes. But to its own credit, Cassius he left the military over the death of his wife, and he's been dealing with that baggage. And so it's selfish of him, but it kind of feels like Cassius is trying to thrust the role of his late wife onto Estelle, and Estelle would never take it. It would always bounce off of her, and he'd start to feel exasperated, and so now it became kind of a meme in his psyche. And so he keeps saying those things, so he doesn't really mean them anymore. But at one point in his life, I think he surely did. And I mean, that's where Cassius is as a bracer.
Well, there are other kind of normative things about Cassius. He's clearly, like, almost every character you meet is like, oh yeah, I knew your dad. He was really great. And like, there's this close link between Cassius and Joshua as well. Joshua has clearly bonded much better with Cassius than Estelle ever did.
And that's probably Cassius's fault.
It probably is Cassius's fault. But again, like, that's part of why I perceived the game to be saying Joshua is better, because Joshua is closer to this character that literally everybody tells you is perfect.
Yeah.
And yeah, I got a bit sick of hearing about Cassius.
I keep making these comparisons, but both Fullmetal Alchemist and Hunter x Hunter are on the conceit of this distant father figure that everyone talks about, everyone knows, but the principal character, like you as a viewer, never really get to meet, and even the principal characters don't really know what they do or what they've done to get their reputation. And so, like, again, it really fits neatly into my shonen analogy for this game.
Well, I mean, that suggests that it's a good analogy and a good way of understanding the game.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, what were you saying, Devin?
I was just going to say that, like, everyone in the goddamn world says Cassius Bright is the greatest man I've ever known, and blah, blah, blah. But when you get to the end, and he beats the shit out of the bad guy...
Metal Gear.
Yes.
He beats Metal Gear.
Fucking hell.
Well, like, there's Metal Gear, but also not Virgil from not Devil May Cry. He just punches the shit out of him because he was idolizing him for no goddamn reason.
That was disciplinary.
Yeah, he was just like, hey, fuck off. I left the military because I didn't want to deal with this shit.
Yeah,
Stop idolizing me.
I left the military specifically in your hands because I trained you and I trusted you to do a good job so that I wouldn't have to. And now here I am because you've done a bad job and let me down. Yeah, that was a good moment.
That's where Cassius kind of owns up to that split, because he doesn't even feel like he lives up to the hero worship, the mythology that's been built around him, just because he had some good strategies during a war, but he's been mythologized. And
he is Solid Snake.
Yeah.
Oh god. I don't know Metal Gear well enough to understand these jokes.
No, that's fine.
He's
big boss.
It's a big con of this game's 40-hour length and all the plot happening mostly in the final arc of the game.
I guess it's just my reading speed, but I took 30 hours both times.
40. Well, like,
my Steam hours say 70.
I did a bit of farting around, but also... we'll come on to the combat systems more generally, but there were fights where I basically... There's a mechanic in this where when you retry a fight, it gets less difficult. And there were fights where I literally just waited out a retry, because I couldn't be arsed with the fight in its initial form. So that will have bumped up my hours a bit. And a certain amount of kind of sitting there feeling angry or distressed while the game was terrible at me, and I didn't want to interact with it. Might have bumped up my playtime a bit, but
so Devin, you've played this game twice. What's your read on it? What do you think about it?
Well, it has a female protagonist, which we only got in Final Fantasy in 2010. It has, and it's in its second chapter, has a sole female protagonist.
Can I hold you up?
Wait! Final Fantasy VI, Devin.
Sole female protagonist.
Final Fantasy X-2. And for that matter, like, Yuna is the hero of Final Fantasy X.
Fuck off with that Yuna.
What year is 10? What year is 10?
2001.
Yeah, X-2 is 2004, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, let's pull up Final Fantasy X.
I still think Final Fantasy VI is a good... already beat that out.
Yeah, no. Not with that mess of a character.
It's... Okay. I mean, Celeste is decent too.
Like, the problem with bringing up FF6 is FF6 has about 8 main characters.
FF6 is... I agree it's a mess. But also Terra's an awful character and very... But okay, whatever, I don't need to talk about that game.
Okay, but also, my main point is Final Fantasy X-2 isn't, like, a lot of people don't consider that a main series thing, even though it is a direct sequel to Final Fantasy X, and it took them until 13 to get, like, oh, hey, Lightning. There's Lightning. She's the main character. And Tales of Berseria is the first one with a sole female protagonist in the series, and that's coming out next year.
How many Tales protagonists use swords? Is it all of them?
So many.
Well, it's not Jude, and...
Speaking of Jude, and Leia, and Alvin. Jude borrows from Joshua's looks. Leia is basically Estelle with Annalis's hair, and Alvin borrows some stuff from Olivier.
Well, Alvin borrows some stuff from Zelos, but Zelos is fundamentally the same archetype as Olivier. The big difference is that Olivier is pansexual, whereas all those other characters are straight.
Yeah. Also, on that canon pansexual party member, which is still not a thing that, Final Fantasy's done.
Yeah, he's
quibble.
No, he's canon pansexual, but he's canon pansexual in, like, the most negatively stereotyped way possible.
He's a fucking bard.
He's a very problematic character. Problematic is a good word here.
He's a fucking bard. He would act that way if he was straight, too. He's a dude being an idiot. Well, he's just a fuckboy, okay?
Yeah.
But
I love him anyway.
Yeah, but you love fuckboy characters.
I can appreciate fuckboy characters. You have no tolerance for anyone.
Right. So, two separate problems here. One is that I've known people like that in real life, and I can't stand to be around them. So I can't stand to be around them as video game characters either. And the other is that the specific ways in which his sexuality is represented, and, like, it's mostly when you first meet him, and then kind of non-specific thereafter. But it's specifically, it portrays him as pansexual because he's a hedonist with no self-control, which makes him seem predatory. And that's a very harmful stereotype about gay people. And then on top of that, because that wasn't a bad enough stereotype, he's also a spy, or at least a dishonest agent doing political espionage work, which is, okay, it's an older stereotype about gay people, but it's equally harmful, or it's got an equal history of harm.
He is also a bard, which in fantasy and fiction tends to be, you talk to a bard because they can get into parties and they can overhear shit and they can spy on people. Like, that's a bard thing.
Yeah, Becky's right, though. Those are old and problematic stereotypes.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate how confident Olivier was, but I can't get past how just obviously problematic that character is.
Anyway, like, does that wrap us up for plot issues? Because
I mean, I have some more to add if we're just all done.
Go ahead.
Okay, there's one part of this, well, the whole end of the game, or the whole general conceit of this game is actual fascism is happening, and this is one of the few JRPGs that acknowledges that it's actual fascism and not just like a king gone mad, or like there's levels to the fascism. There's a lot of individual motivations to it, and the Colonel Richard, the guy who does the coup at the end of the game, he clearly has anxieties about his country, and he just wants to see his country survive. He doesn't want to be in a low point again like during the war. He wants to be prepared. He wants his people to be ready, and that's an honest, sympathetic view of fascism that the game also is able to excise, say we don't need to do this. And that's, especially in the political climate of right now today when I played the game, that's a very reaffirming and responsible plot beat in a JRPG, for one that, models itself off of very much older fantasy JRPGs. And yeah, that's my very concise rendering of that.
Yeah, actually, I suppose once it actually brings that to life, rather than it just being, there's a bad guy who's up to something bad.
Yeah.
Once it actually takes the time to bring that to life, it did become more engaging. And I think if the bits of the game that concern that stood on their own, I'd have enjoyed them a lot more, because then that's where it works. And it works when it's dealing with the developed characters who are involved in this political undercurrent. And that's not just like Colonel Richard and the military people. It's also Niall, the reporter. He's a great character.
He is a great character.
And some of the recurring braces, I mean, some of them not so much, but some of the recurring braces, kind of all the fact that you meet all the kind of regional politicians, the mayors, and you get insights into them. Though, because those characters, unlike the kind of people in the street NPCs, they do have a degree of agency. Sometimes you can find them, sometimes you can't. They travel around the world with you. Or not with you, but you meet them in different places. And that, I felt, was where the writing did kind of come good.
Yeah, that's where the structure definitely works.
That's where it did start to feel more like a living, breathing world. I just spent too much time wandering around towns looking for side quest triggers.
It's a very loose game. It's a very pleasant and ego-sensitive. It's a very pleasurable game, you know. And so,
well, it's not driving you up the wall.
You know, if you don't see right past it, which I did at first, and I mean, I was able to. I kind of eased into it, which it's clear Becky never did. But it's more AAA than most JRPGs are going to play, oddly. But, I mean, it still has its groundswells. It still has its very great notes. It'll hit, you know, if you're able to accept it for just being a really relaxing, positive, upbeat video game.
Yeah, I had something else. What was I going to say? Oh, the other bit of kind of more plottish stuff is the way that it kind of, and we're shading towards mechanics here, I suppose, the way that there are chunks of play that are, for want of a better word, entire levels of the game that are purely in, like, explore this space and talk to people and have cutscenes and things. Like, there are a couple of scenes where you have to investigate a crime scene. And what that means is go around this place and find all the findable things, and then report back. And there are sequences where you're just told, oh, like, go and meet this group of people, go and introduce yourself to this group of people. They're scattered around town. You have to go around town and find them.
Go put on a play.
The play less so because you're less actively involved in the process of putting it on. But, like, the play was, of all the theatre sections that I've seen played more or less straight in a JRPG, this was the one I hated least. The only play I enjoyed more in a JRPG was the one in Tales of Vesperia, which is because it's the most brazen act of a developer telling you, look, this is what our game is actually about that I've ever seen. Like, that's for when we do Tales of Vesperia, which we will inevitably do at some point.
Yeah, if you can buy me a 360.
They go for like $50 now, it's fine. I can do that.
They go for like $100. It's a pain in the ass.
What? I will ship you a UK 360. It'd be cheaper.
Yeah, managing that electrical nonsense would be the death of me.
Well, it's got a HDMI.
Yeah.
Anyway, story for another time.
God.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's very true. Trails is not regimented as you expect. I mean, you kind of expect certain things when you play a JRPG. You expect it's either going to set up how it's going to progress, either by really strict dungeons and not dungeon, then not dungeon, or at least you're going to go to a town, do these plot beats, and it's going to. I mean, you're going to get into this groove, and you're going to. But Trails doesn't really do that. Trails kind of.
Yeah, it very much shakes up the idea that you come to a new town, you talk to the first NPC. No, you have a cutscene when you walk in, which tells you, oh, the NPC you need to see is in that house. And you pop to the shops first, just in case you get locked out of them after. But you pop to the shops to see if there's anything new. You go to that NPC's house. They say, oh, you need to talk to the person who lives down the road, which is either somebody else in town or you have to do a little bit of world exploring to go to the remote hermit's house or whatever. Then they send you to the dungeon. You do the dungeon, you come back, the town is very glad that you've done the dungeon, and then you move on. Trails disrupts that very well. Because sometimes you go to a town and, like, you actually do stuff in the town. And sometimes, like, it's in the chapter with the play, like, a key plot trigger is you just walk into the wrong part of town.
Yeah.
You do the classic JRPG thing of... You do the classic JRPG thing of explore the whole of this town, get the idea of where everything is, and as soon as you stray onto the wrong side of the tracks, these thugs come up to you.
Like, everyone in the town is talking about how this gang is making a ruckus, and you should probably stay away from this part of town, but you have to talk to the person anyway, because you're like, hey, I heard you're being noisy over here, and he just kind of shoos you away. Then as you're walking away, they come after you, and you get into a scuffle. And the mayor's watching, and it's awkward.
So yeah, I mean, there are, like, the existence of set pieces in the towns was nice. It was a nice way of changing up how a town works, but it did also make towns feel a bit like dungeons. And a dungeon is a very artificial space created for ludic play, and thus directly addressed to the player. So again, it plays back into that thing of the game being more a ludic thing than a fiction, which, like, some of the ludics are pretty good. Like, brace yourselves, I liked the combat in a JRPG.
Oh, you liked it?
I thought it was... I like the systems, and
they are incredibly neat systems. Like, I mean, neat as in tidy, like precise and specific.
Yeah, I thought they really only came good in the final dungeon, because there you didn't just have good systems, but you also had a set of enemies that was cohesive and meaningful, and you could understand how all the different parts of an encounter related to one another. For most of the game, particularly the wandering encounters, they just felt very random. Like, there didn't seem to be any logic to which enemies had what abilities, but the system stayed strong.
My problem with the dungeons is just how god awfully drab this game is. Honestly, it has very, very little sense of composition. Just kind of rectangles, and rectangles.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's very detailed visually, particularly in the towns.
It is minutely detailed,
but it's not. The details don't feel terribly significant. Like, each area has one tile set that's the colour of, oh, this is the kind of dock town industrial, so everything's slightly blue tinted. And then this is the engineering town, so everything's rust coloured. And the dungeons are like that too.
Or fairly recognize difficulties Falcom had transitioning to 3D at the time, but I mean, it was still very bland.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it does a very good job of evoking an older style.
Later cities are much better than the first two cities, but it's very rare for me to go through a dungeon space in a JRPG and feel absolutely nothing. But I realized when I went through the one with the air bandits, how it was just rectangle on rectangle on rectangle, that they were definitely callbacking, or it was a callback to an older style of dungeon design, like Dragon Quest. But that style does not work without a top-down perspective, because you're not looking at a map anymore. You're there physically in that rectangle, and yeah, it's just very boring.
The angle that the camera is fixed at, I think, betrays that. Because the camera is fixed at this really steep, like 45 or maybe even 60-degree downward angle, rather than, like, normally in a 3D JRPG, you have the ability to raise and lower it, or it's quite low down, so you can see ahead of the characters. Whereas with this, you can't at all. So you can't really see a lot of the space at once, ever. You get the bit immediately around you, like you would get in a top-down, and maybe some bits out the corners of the screen if your monitor is wide enough.
And that's because you can change the perspective, but in dungeons they usually lock it, and the art is obviously not drawn to be viewed as isometric perspective. It's not like the Mother games, which are clearly, they want you to look at these things in this specific, like, staging of the isometric perspective, and Trails does nothing with that perspective. It's just picked out of a hat, it feels like to me. It shows off, it gives the best angle to their sprites, but it doesn't really do much for their textures.
Well, even then, like, there are definitely angles from which the sprites look like they're falling over. Like,
there were some great vistas and moments and occasions. They were very detailed. Like there's that waterfall when you get to one of the gates. I don't remember which one, and I was like, "Oh, that's nice," but it very, very rarely was that I feel like
where
that.
you're going. I think it's from the second chapter to the third one, or maybe third to fourth, and the path actually goes round a cliff, and there's this moment where they see the sea, which is okay. It's a big trope thing, but that moment was delivered fairly well.
Yeah, I think my point here is they're not ignorant of composition, but they only do it like once every 10 hours.
Yeah, there are other bits, like the arena works very well for being what it is, and the times where there's a cutscene that represents combat. This is not something that we see very often in JRPGs that are going for a retro style. They don't do it with any kind of detail at all. But this game, there are several sequences where you watch a battle playing out. It happens in the play. There's a sword fight. It happens in the arena. There's a section in chapter 3 with Agate, I think, 3 or 4.
It's the start of 4.
Start of 4, thank you. And those are quite dynamic.
Yeah.
Because it's not so much a visual composition thing as it is a cinematography thing. Like, the camera will swoop as necessary, or it will take up the right angle. But the tools aren't there ever for you to choose an angle.
Also, the arena is interesting because it acknowledges the battle system and incorporates it into the fiction of the game, which I've never seen in a JRPG either. It's like, you can see the numbers popping. I don't remember if you can see the numbers or not, but you can see
you can.
You can see the numbers. You can see the numbers popping above their heads, and this pretty much complete cinematic. You're just watching these enemies fight it out. They even take turns, but you're still watching.
Yeah, yeah, and that really expressed to me the balance that the combat system found, where it's still abstract and it kind of uses the abstractions of the combat well, but also it does take a step towards being more concrete. So the combat is tactical RPG combat. It's spatial, and spatial arrangements of moves have significance. Positioning has significance. So, kind of in that context, it's possible to incorporate it in a way that, you know, you couldn't do that with FF7. These two rows of things standing opposite each other, taking turns. In this, it kind of works. It's close enough that it fits among the other abstractions.
That's all I have. That's basically everything.
I have been utterly silent this entire episode.
Well, you haven't been completely silent, but yes. I mean, is there anything else you want to say about the game? Because, I mean, like, I've been quite critical of it. I know you enjoyed it a lot more than I did.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, even when I was having issues last time I played it, just because it's from 2004, so it is, like, that era of design, and I kind of think the visual design feels like it was like if Golden Sun got put into a 3D engine, which is not a compliment to most people, but I like it.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I just, this time through, I beat, I took the time and beat one of the, well, there's a boss before the final dungeon that you don't have to beat to progress, but if you do, you get an achievement. And I did it, and oh my god, he can stall you so bad. Like, there are so many ways to cope with damage that he gets better versions of than you do. But it's... I really think that I'm excited to play the second chapter, because I think I'm not... I don't agree that, like, the entirety of the first chapter specific bits of Estelle and Joshua becoming full-fledged bracers was a waste of time, like you guys seem to say. Like, I liked it as a sort of coming-of-age story of sorts.
That's what I could call it. I wouldn't call it a waste of time, it's just very sterile for me.
I wouldn't call it a waste of time. My problem is, I think it got in the way of the other thing, and I think the other thing got in the way of it. I can confess that I enjoyed that stuff, although my angle of it is something I can't really talk a lot about. I enjoyed it as like a moving history, because obviously Estelle and Joshua are influencing history in this place. But I think the aesthetic of history within fiction is kind of self-serving, and you don't really get a lot out of it besides your own quaint enjoyment of putting together this puzzle. And I mean, I very much enjoyed it, but I can't talk a lot about it.
I don't know, maybe I'm just weak to games where, like, positivity permeates the entire goddamn thing, because I really like Kingdom Hearts.
Honestly, I've seen a trend of that, Devin. You really like just really positive, uplifting games.
Maybe it's because I'm so goddamn angry all the time. Idiot fuckers. Being ahistorical about my favorite genre.
Because when I hit a game like that, really upbeat and positive, I just bounce off it. I'm like, why are these characters so happy? I don't get it.
I guess, like, if the game hadn't, like, it's not just upbeat and positive. It also quite deliberately sometimes plays for comedy.
Yeah, it does. That's another similarity it has with Persona.
Well, it's also another similarity it has with the shonen manga stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
But, like, I'm not a big fan of comedy. Pretty much generally, I don't like prepared, planned humor. It's not something I get a lot out of. I always feel the artifice more than the humor. And when the game was trying to tell a joke, that was usually when I was most uncomfortable.
In the late half of the game, when I was just really invested in the fiction, I started laughing at the jokes. But I laugh at almost everyone's jokes, if you've noticed, even on the podcast. So that's not really high praise. And I found I'll just say, I found the humor pretty lame in Trails. And Persona's not a very funny game, but the funny moments in Persona are way, way, way more realized than the kind of canned humor you find in Trails.
I mean, the humor in Trails isn't quite as trite and shallow and
it's
conformative
earnest,
as a Resonance of Fate is.
Oh, God.
But it's just really bland. It's all jokes you've heard before.
I laughed at every beat of the bathhouse scene, despite how cliched it all was.
Oh my god! Yeah, that was one of those bits where I almost pitched the controller out the window. Like, even in games that I like that have bathhouse scenes, I almost have to leave the room. For how terrible and often those scenes come in, I actually found that, I mean, as far as the bath scene goes, that was rather tasteful. It didn't objectify the characters, and it just kind of had Estelle being it didn't physically objectify, it just emotionally objectified Estelle as a kind of tsundere, but yeah, well, I mean, the resources aren't really there for the game to visually objectify her, and that's not a criticism. And it kind of boiled down to really just kind of a moment. There's a lot of moments like that in Trails. It's just a really quaint moment, a cute moment with her name is Tita and Estelle, and I mean, that's the kind of stuff in Trails.
I also feel like it's worth stating again, yeah, we've heard it all before, but also this game is 11 years old!
But these jokes are
old.
Newer than that.
I mean,
these jokes existed in...
Yeah, I'm just saying, a lot of people forget, this game is 11 fucking years old.
No, I internalized that in the first place, and I still Trails is old, man. It's
old, but it's
old.
also
it was old when it came out in 2004. Yes,
it's
very conventional.
Yeah, which is, it does what it does well, and what it does is be traditional and set up for probably a better game.
I would tell all of you, if it comes down to Trails or Legend of Heroes or Dragon Quest, I would go with Legend of Heroes 10 out of 10 times. 10 out of 10.
Well, I don't have the versing in those older games, so like the games I know best all are after this game.
Dragon Quest is also very conventional, but it's more of a nostalgic
conservatism.
Yeah, it's a very nostalgic take. It was I think I would argue it was nostalgic on the Super Nintendo, and
yeah,
it's just as earnest. It's just positive and upbeat. So it's kind of just what you want to bring into it. I need to stop hating on Dragon Quest a little bit less.
I guess I'd compare this game favourably to Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
That's a low bar.
But yeah, that's really, it's close. Despite it being formally like Persona, its tone and attitude is most similar to Dragon Quest. I don't even know if we're going to talk about the battle systems.
Well, like,
the battle system
I mentioned it a bit, but
I got an
AOE art in the prologue, and then I trashed everything from then on.
I want to take out two things really bad. One, I cannot believe why you cannot move and then take an action. I understand they kind of set up things like, well, you have to do this difficult, make this choice. You got to either dodge this attack or make an action. But really, in every instance of that, you're going to dodge the attack instead of making the action. And so it seems to...
No, I just tanked it most of the time.
Wow, well, I have to minimize all damage. I am very efficient with these numbers.
By the final boss, what I was doing for stuff like that was casting Earthguard on people.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I had Earthguard
because you get the AoE Earthguard that just negates the next thing that happens to them.
But I mean, I'm just reasoning. Another thing that bothered me, another thing with the positioning is there is no way to pass your turn without moving, which makes no sense to me too.
Yeah.
What if I want to keep casting Earthguard in that formation I have set up? I can't. I can't pass turns. I have to move. It's really weird. But yeah, those are just really inefficient decisions, and the way it sets itself as a strategic RPG, but it's really an incidental strategy. And not really I can't really create...
It's very light strategy.
Yeah, I can't really create my formations, and I didn't hate it, but it just kind of it seemed kind of funny to me.
It's very bare bones. It was like the first 3D Trails game. I almost said Tales. That's a year difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was the first 3D Trails game, and they were trying to figure out what they were doing. And I think even like the 2 years between first chapter and second chapter, they made some improvements, which is good because this game could use some improvements. And also, if you put the level cap at 40 on the first part of the game, and then like raise it to 100 in the second, you better make some fucking adjustments.
How long is it if it's up to 100?
I'm pretty sure it's level 100, but the store boasts 70 hours of core gameplay.
Well, that explains why the prologue had to be a game on its own, then, doesn't it?
I warned you. I literally told you this game is a game that fills out its world with texts of the literal and figurative sort. It's a lot of text.
You didn't tell me it was of the most mundane sort either.
Well, it kind of has to be by definition.
I know.
If it's going to fill out a world, then mundane comes from mundus, which means world.
I should have expected it.
You just got dunked on.
You just got dunked on by like Latin etymology, which like really says a lot more negative about me than it does about you. Because being the kind of person who dunks on people using Latin etymology explains why I live alone.
Oh.
I just feel sorry.
A little
for you.
harsh.
Yeah, you took that way too far.
You got to be balanced in these things. I'm going to dunk on other people. I've got to be prepared to dunk on myself too. But anyway,
I think I could have been more sold on this game, especially in the beginning, if someone told me it was like Persona. This is why I keep saying it, because the people who like Persona, you'll probably like Trails. I can't say how you wouldn't like Trails, because the aesthetic of there being just an amount, just an absurd amount of text, yeah, they share that. They both have that, and that's good in my opinion.
No, I mean,
I don't think people like Persona for that.
Well, there has to be some people who like that.
There might be some
there has
people,
to be someone
most
else like
people.
Me. I mean, who's listening to this cast? The people who are shipping Personas not listening to this cast.
That's true. But like, I get the impression most Persona fans like it because it's kind of dark and broody and teenage, and this is the
so short.
opposite image. But this is the opposite image of
it's true.
Kind of.
It's true. It could not be so different tonally. But formally.
Yeah, people are not playing Persona for its form, they're playing it for its tone.
Man.
Anyway,
yeah, the battle system's excellent though. I got nitpicky as a designer, but like when you play it, you can't. It's hard to complain about it, but just because it's just precise.
I'm going to say one thing in complaint, which is that when you start this game, it gives you a choice of 3 difficulty modes, but the difficulty modes are normal, hard, and, like, bastard mode. And there's no easy mode. Easy mode is achieved by setting the option where retrying makes things easier, and then just failing the fight until you can win it, because the level has dropped that much.
It shows their bias, because they have the easy mode, right? But they don't let you access it until you at least play. Like it's like you have to try this first before I'll let you make it easier. It's kind of
yeah. And I'm gonna say this.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it's very Dark Souls.
No, that's not how Dark Souls work. Don't bring that weak shit in here. It's Devil May Cry, where if you die 3 times, it literally unlocks easy mode.
Dark Souls is like you have to look up, if you get stuck, you need to go on the wiki and you need to look up exactly what...
Dark Souls
what
is
random...
if you die on normal, you get put in bastard mode.
Well, that's Demon Souls, but you can get, there's some, really, Demon Souls, the more you die, the harder the game gets. Yeah. That's so dumb. But yeah, Dark Souls, you have to find some random esoteric combination of things if you don't wish to grind, or you can grind too.
I just wanted to be the one to do the Dark Souls joke for an episode.
I just had this argument the other day. Dark Souls.
Right. Sorry, every time Dark Souls comes up, you've just had this argument the other day.
I just had an argument.
Oh my god, Devin.
You're welcome. Can we be done with this joke now, please?
No.
Okay.
Dark Souls will be forever. I can't wait till we should do a cast on Dark Souls, honestly.
You see, you're right, but also you thought I was obnoxious about this game. If you make me play Dark Souls, I'm going to fire you both into the sun.
Dark Souls, if you found Kingdom Hearts clunky, Dark Souls is just a whole nother level of clunky. Yeah, I can leave it at that.
So, Dark Souls next episode then. No.
Yeah, please.
No. God, no.
I just got Bloodborne. Okay. Yeah, I don't...
Well, you were the one who was saying, like, two episodes ago that you really like hard games.
Yeah,
so...
I actually do. Yeah.
He's being consistent.
True.
I've been researching copious amounts of Gradius. I wouldn't do that if I didn't really like hard games.
God. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
I've been watching Let's Plays, so
Okay.
not me playing.
That's better. Speaking of suffering, I just got shipped a copy of Star Ocean 4.
We should
Wow.
play that together. It would be a good wheeze because I've got to get through it at some point.
I do have one thing that niggle about Trails. I don't know why I said that word. There's actually one thing I found out when I was looking at my walkthrough, like halfway through the game, when I felt like I need to look at the walkthrough now, is that certain actions or certain dialogue options with you can take with Estelle. For some reason, they let you say certain things with Estelle, even though she has full agency. Sometimes they wrest control from you and they let you pick whatever you want to select from Estelle. And the options are pretty much say something really incredibly dumb or say the right thing. And I'll be honest, like, to stay consistent to Estelle's character, she would probably say the kind of airheaded thing. But if you want to get the bonus BP, your kind of overall score for the game, you have to say the smart thing. So you have to not only break Estelle's character, but have foreknowledge of the game. It's kind of a New Game Plus thing. But
No, it's not.
Well,
it's just paying attention.
I actually didn't feel like it undercut Estelle's character because I felt that everybody was underestimating Estelle. I always
the whole point is showing off how much she is a good bracer, even though
so
people don't
why is
respect
it
her.
left up to you? So let's say you don't pay attention at all. Then your Estelle is now completely aloof and completely lost in every single one of these handlings. But on the other hand, if you are paying really rapt attention, now your Estelle is kind of realizing this potential.
That's immersion.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's a kind of a contradiction that should not be left. I don't think it should be left up to
That's meaningful choice in a video game.
me. No, it's not meaningful at all.
Well, it's it does give you the option of because it's not just you could still choose the Estelle option,
Right.
the dumb option.
Right, but I think my problem here is it's tied to a permanent system that is waved in your face all game if you've been smart or not. It's just and yeah, I guess that's the quote unquote meaningful choice going on.
The choices never give a huge amount of BP.
No, it's one.
They give you one or two.
I did every single side quest, but I was off about 4 because sometimes I made the wrong choices. So this is where it's coming from. I am a little bit miffed.
Meanwhile, I went and got all the fucking chapters of the book, and oof.
Yeah, I didn't even finish the game as a rank 1 bracer, so I missed a bunch of side quests because I didn't look at the board at the right time, and there were a bunch that I failed because I didn't realize that they timed out.
We haven't really talked about the side quests.
I really like the side quests in this game.
I haven't liked them.
Yeah, I like them because I feel like they tie you to they give you a reason to believe that bracers are beloved by the community because they get rid of all this dumb shit and help people out all the time. Even if it's for money, they're active members of the community while they're in there. And
some of it was okay.
I also, the one thing I do like is that the monsters, if there's a notorious monster on a road that you don't have to kill, and you let the quest time out, it's basically someone else took care of it, so the road's clear.
Yeah.
And it's just
Except
you're not
for
the only one.
Yeah, there are a few where it makes it so you have to kill them, which is a bit more obnoxious. But also, I think it was a way of putting in boss fights without putting in boss fights, which I like, because one thing I will say for this game is there's only one boss fight that's just a boss fight, which is the evil penguin in Zeiss.
Whoa!
It's
Penguins are always evil.
There is when you're at the end of the Mirror's Manor, and he lets out his Doingo and Dongo dogs, which seems to be just to fight a really hard boss fight. I like the boss fight because that was actually a kind of a peak point for the challenge of the game, but it just seemed like a boss fight for there to be a boss
and
fight.
it's a surprise too.
It was a surprise.
Yeah, it's but also there's a bit of a trope of the cruel nobleman who keeps monsters. I wasn't surprised that character had carnivorous pets.
It wasn't like Dragon Falls from the Ceiling, Final Fantasy VII. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was odd timing for boss, but not exactly odd positioning in the fiction.
Yeah. It wasn't necessarily dictated by, oh, this is a video game. Video games have levels. Levels end with a boss, so here is a boss. I mean, that's when boss fights really get on my nerves. And it works in some kinds of games, but I find it really distracts me from any story stuff that's going on. Whereas this game, all the bosses, bar that penguin, happened because you were at a point in the story where you had to fight a skilled person or a significant monster.
A killer penguin.
Or a killer penguin. That was the third category, was killer penguins. It's a category of one. And I got to, okay, killer penguins are good. We can have more killer penguins, but...
Actually, I think there is a reason for that, and the entire cave is infested with penguins. And I say infested it's not their habitat.
I just want to say, I kind of know where you're going. I wouldn't say that's a reason. I just think it's another instance of Trails being really effective at foreshadowing it. They already know there's a giant penguin there, and so they make sure...
No, what I was going to say is the entire game they've been saying that, monsters like Septium, they're going to go after anything that glows like Septium because they think it's Septium, and the moss is glowing moss. And the penguin thinks you're walking away with its stuff. That's why it attacks you.
Well, right, but that's foreshadowing for this kind of... this cave didn't need to have a giant penguin at the end of it. You could have got the Septium and left, which actually other parts of the game did work like that. So, that's all Becky was saying.
It changed it up.
Yeah, it changed it up, but the penguin is literally just there for you to fight it.
Yeah, but it changed it. It changed it up. It changed it up by going, let's go back to doing what FF6 used to do, which,
Yeah, it doesn't bother me as much. I was kind of being a devil's advocate there, but what Becky is saying is still true.
It didn't bother, as arbitrary bosses went, it wasn't a particularly bad example. It just stands out in this game because it's the only one. And, most of the time when a boss fight happened, I was like, yeah, this is a good point for a boss fight. And actually, the boss fights were pretty good. The boss fights, because they had a more intentional design than the Wandering encounters, because they were more kind of deeply thought out.
They were active agents of the plot usually, too.
Yeah, but they played more to the strengths of the combat system. The boss enemies tended to have quite well-defined identities in terms of what they did, whereas the wandering monsters didn't. And the evil penguin doesn't, because what the hell do you associate with an evil penguin?
Barfing
water,
fucking anchovies at you.
Does he do that?
Yep.
He slaps you with sardine bullets or something. Yeah, he pukes fish at you.
Actually, in fairness,
penguin.
What the evil penguin's moveset is... He's got all the moves of the ordinary evil penguins that are the wandering monsters in that dungeon. Which, okay, fair enough. But, why is this dungeon in an industrialized medieval Europe type climate full of penguins? Where are the penguins coming from? And that's where the enemy design fell down, is there's no context for these monsters. There's no reason for monsters that look like this to be here.
There's no reason for orbs.
Yeah.
There's.
Well, that's not where I was going to go, but I honestly like that. This is irresponsible, but I just kind of like when JRPGs don't care. They don't explain it. I make fun of the dragon falling from the ceiling in Final Fantasy VII, but that's actually one of the moments I like in the game because it's absurd. I'm attracted to that kind of absurd element in JRPGs. And is it strong? Is it good? I don't know. I'm not there for that argument.
My preference runs the other way.
But Trails isn't really even absurd with its flora fauna. They're just kind of there.
And I would agree that the boss design is good if I didn't spend all of the wandering encounters getting surprise attacks and building up craft points so that I could just unleash all my S breaks immediately and decimate all bosses.
I stopped being that careful.
It takes 3 seconds per mob and then I kill them 3 times as fast, so...
I was kind of really conservative with my use of S breaks. So, S breaks are basically limit breaks, or the limit break equivalent mechanic for those of you who haven't played the game. But I was really conservative with them because one thing they allow you to do is steal an enemy's turn, which means you can, if an enemy's about to do an attack where it's got a really high bonus on that time slot, you can steal that turn and get that bonus yourself.
Yeah.
And I was always saving them for if I needed to do that.
I was not doing that.
Yeah, no, I didn't do that.
I didn't even charge the 200. When I hit 100, I was like, all right, time to S-break.
Yeah, the thing is, you could do that, or you could also be making use of all your, speed-altering abilities and delay attacks, Joshua has Flicker, which just, delays turns. But also, it's just...
Yeah, I wasn't sure. What I did was I charged the 200, and then I preferred to use crafts, because I really enjoyed how crafts brought out the personality of the fighter, which is it's a good compromise.
Crafts are really good.
Good compromise between, Chrono Trigger's characters have... They get their magic related to their character, and they get their techniques related to the character. But Trails, you get to customize your magic, and the characters also have their own, their own learned honed fighting style, which is really neat to me.
And you get to customize your arts and crafts.
Yeah, arts and crafts.
It makes me chuckle every time.
And I'm going to say something controversial that at the end of the game, I actually preferred the materia system to Trails' orbment system, only because of the wacky things you can do with materia. Like, for example, I could put my Tifa on, I could give her auto counter and cover, and so she would get a ton of attacks. I mean, I like doing silly things like that. And Trails is so precise and specific that your best setup is going to be boosting all your stats and having one AoE, a good AoE art. And I had that on every character, and I was like, well, now every character's the same. And I mean, that's my fault for trying to play really efficient, but like, it was there.
I don't know, my problem with augments in this versus something like materia is simply that I didn't ever really figure out how the combinations of quartzes added up to particular spells.
It's not really well explained. It's in the book, though.
Right.
Your manual thing.
Yeah, like you have an entire handbook.
I honestly didn't care about it. I kind of put in orbs until I got spells that looked better.
Yeah, basically, every quartz has an elemental affinity, and it has can have multiple affinities with different numbers of crystals are the units that it gives. Then you add those up on each line of the orbment, and you get different arts.
I mean, I spent a lot of time with orbments specifically because I did not feel like looking at the book that told me, and so I just traded them in and out until I got the spell I wanted. Not efficient, but
I kind of didn't even do that because I was playing. I was quite tight for time, so I was just jamming stuff in that worked, and I only happened to discover how to get the AoE heals after about 3 chapters of the game, which was not so good.
Yeah, that's
great. On me because
I honestly only messed with my orbments once every chapter too. I got it out of the way, and then I wouldn't touch it again because I didn't feel like I didn't want to. But yeah.
I basically stopped in at the Orbital workshop every time I had a spare bit of fucking crystals, and then I got all my characters have EP cut 2 if not 3 and action 2 and cast 2, and I just went nuts with it because I had all these fucking Sepith. I got to use them for something, and then I destroyed the final boss.
Yeah, I liked that the achievement for accumulating lots of Sepith was called, you can exchange that for money, right?
Yeah, I got that one too,
that
just
was
because I wasn't...
That's not even the biggest one. There's one for getting 3,000 of each instead of 1,000, and it's called... Oh, what is it?
I think it's why do you have that many or something? I don't even know.
It's why do you have this many?
Yeah.
That's genuinely... I enjoy that joke more than I've enjoyed any joke that actually happened in the course of playing the game.
Oh, I missed some non-story related treasure chests, and I didn't get every chest phrase.
I didn't realize that was
14.
an achievement because I knew they had flavor text the treasures, and then I forgot. I thought, oh, that was interesting, that's cute. The first couple times, and then I totally forgot about it and just opened the chest and ran. I was just playing too efficiently. I just forgot to take my time and read the treasures.
You see, my response when Devon pointed out that so when you open a treasure chest, you can then go back to it and it's got a bit of text. Because everything in this game has text that's a quip about why are you coming back and having another look at this chest, you idiot. And my response to that was, oh, that's cute, with a very dubious tone of voice, and I realised it would get on my tits very quickly. So I looked at a few of them just to see if the standard of humour got any more inventive, but it kind of did. They're all basically the same joke, and there's a lot of chests in the game.
A lot of, yeah, there's a lot of chests. I can't believe I didn't get to this, but when I was ranting about how I did not like the design and composition of rooms, but there's actually 4 dungeons that are completely identical. They're just towers, you do them 4 times. I hate that.
You don't even have to do 2 of
I know, but I did them.
You twit.
You see, I kind of was like, oh, that's going to be another tower. I'm not going to bother unless the plot sends me there. And mercifully, it didn't twice.
But even those 2 times, even when the plot sends you there twice, I think that's twice too many times. Don't. You can reuse textures, but don't reuse the same design. That's That's so garish.
Even though they're basically mazes where you can't see the entire goddamn thing, I went through them all, got all the chests.
I didn't get all the chests. Actually, the reason it didn't bother me to go through them is because I would run away from every fight and just see what was there, so I didn't miss any equipment. That was the reason I went into
Yeah,
it.
except all the equipment that you'd want is in chests with monsters.
Yeah, you had to fight those, but that's better than going through all the trash, and so I didn't.
I came out of this run a lot more competently leveled than I did my first run. I think I went into the final boss at level 34 or 35 in my first run, and this time around I was 38.
Oh wow.
So
yeah, I was about the same as your first time, the final boss at 34, 33.
I think I was about 37. Like, there's a lot of leveling in the final dungeon because it's massive, but like I also backtracked a lot.
I didn't really like the final dungeon, so I kind of I didn't get all the chests.
Yeah, the final dungeon's kind of crap actually.
I kind of passed through all of it, and I didn't get the levels I probably should have. But I didn't really have trouble with the boss either. So
the final dungeon is large and convoluted and visually quite repetitive, but it was where the combat system came alive for me. So I
agree with what you said about the enemies being like, they're
consistent and with
clear,
the
exactly.
fiction.
Yeah. But besides, it was just like it was the same dungeon design as before, but just more of it. And I was like, wow, I don't want this.
And and the encounters were. I got all of the chests in the final dungeon.
Oh, actually, who was your party for the final dungeon?
Oh, that's interesting.
My party was Estelle, Joshua, Chloe, and Olivier.
Leroy?
Estelle, Joshua, Agate, and Chloe.
You see, my optionals were Tita and the immovable guy. What's his name?
Zane.
Because Tita has flat out the best area of effect craft in the game.
I took, besides Joshua's.
No, because Tita's got the added effect blind, and so much in this game requires hit rolls.
Joshua, if you have an attack warp on Joshua, he'll one hit the enemies. So
not S break, but craft.
Oh, craft. Yeah.
Like Joshua's S break is more powerful, but it's an S break.
Then Joshua has the mean look too.
Yeah, Joshua has the evil eye.
It's a smaller area of effect,
but it has it's just way stronger, and at least if you're fighting trash.
And it has a
it works on bosses
thing.
too. Most bosses, it's Joshua's actually very overpowered. Flicker as well. It reduces their initiative, and I was able to beat difficult fights just by spamming Flicker.
Yeah,
but I mean the key point with the area of effect on Tita's smoke bomb is because it's so big, you can hit so many enemies with it that it will recharge itself.
Tita's crafts are really useful too. She also had that heal craft, which comes off your.
I mean, Olivier has a heal craft too, where he grabs a bouquet, tosses it in the air.
Move.
I didn't get him high enough level. I never saw this.
It's so good, and it restores 800 HP, but that's 1200 if you get it on a crit round, because crit applies to healing.
I mean, I have to confess, I used Agate just because the pit goes even deeper. He's the most efficient character to use because he can power up his crafts really fast, so he can get the most S crafts off faster than anyone else. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to use that. I found Agate's character very boring, but I used him just for that reason.
You had to take damage to save time and charge S breaks.
But I picked Chloe because Chloe's the best girl. I'll just answer that question right now.
Second to Estelle. Estelle is the best. Sorry.
I'm just gonna leave it like that.
I see. My vote is for Tita, so we're clearly just all at odds. But
mine's the protagonist of the next game, so
which I'm not going to play because I don't trust these writers.
I mean, you sat through 60 fucking hours of Resonance of Fate, and this game didn't get, like, enough faith for 40 to pass by peacefully.
Honestly, I'd want more people to play Resonance of Fate if they can tolerate it, right? Because it's a very interesting experimental, and Trails in the Sky is just... Trails in the Sky is...
a very long lineage down from this game, complete with past murderer, little boy, and girl who is being demeaned at some level.
I was just talking, like, ludically. Resonance of Fate
is I know, but
pretty
also,
incredible.
At least there's no Vacheron.
At least there's no Vacheron. Say what you like about Olivier, he's no Vacheron.
Joshua was voiced by Johnny Young Bosch, though, wasn't he? Because I could tell, once I heard his voice clip, I was like, oh, yeah, that's him.
He's in the anime.
I couldn't recognize any of their voices, but yeah.
Okay, so we have one question from an outside source that we haven't already touched on. The one we did touch on was, why is Chloe best girl? Do you have an answer, Leroy?
No, I declined to answer.
Okay.
Chloe's best girl because that's what the writer decided.
Chloe does she gets treated like a princess. It is pretty unfair.
Well, she is a princess.
She is a princess.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But she gets treated like a princess in more ways than just being a princess.
Yep.
She's a very fairy tale character, I think.
Yeah, she is.
I like I like the whole scene where she decides that she's gonna shank a whole gang. She's just gonna fucking stab them.
Oh, yeah, she rips her rapier out.
Yeah, she's just like, yeah, this is gonna go in you. Okay, the other question is, what do you think of the decision to make Estelle the focus character instead of obvious JRPG protagonist Joshua?
I talked about it at least. It's kind of a reversal of convention and kind of young adult tropes in Japanese media, where that's just what it is to me. That's how I saw it. And I found Estelle refreshing. That's the word I would pick. Very refreshing character. And I'm excited to play second chapter to see where Estelle goes.
Yeah.
I think, so the question kind of hints at this, but Joshua is a little bit of a cloud light.
Yeah, he is.
And, I think if I'd realised that early on and had seen this as, this is kind of a Tifa's story looking at a cloud being a cloud, I think I'd have enjoyed it more. But there's a lot of stuff that kind of you get told at the end of this game that if I'd known it at the start of the game, I'd have enjoyed the game a lot more as a result.
It holds on to its hand on about everything in the plot. It just holds on to it. That's just what Trails does.
But I think having that perspective could be interesting. I think because of the way I engaged with the game, or didn't, that perspective is now closed to me, because now I know and I see the game very differently playing it a second time. I salute the attempt, even if it didn't work for me.
And in my opinion, I think this person, Fence Dude, asked this question before getting to the end of the game themselves. And before that twist, in which it's revealed that Estelle is the focus character instead of obvious JRPG protagonist, because obvious JRPG protagonist needs to leave and give Estelle motivation to go solve some more mysteries.
If the last game was about a psychopath, Joshua seems to come out as a sociopath into the game.
Yeah, but he has reasons for being
right. I'm not saying that in a demeaning way, but he clearly can't handle the way he acts around people, and so he needs to leave.
Yeah. And that's not exactly a viewpoint that is something that would make a compelling JRPG, and I think especially not with the style of writing Falcom has.
Oh, right. Joshua could not possibly be the protagonist anymore.
Yeah, no. Especially if he leaves Estelle, which is the whole point of Estelle being a focus is that Joshua is what the focus is looking at. And it is kind of a character study by proxy in the long run, I feel.
Yeah.
But also, Estelle is just a more interesting character than Joshua, and her reacting to all this stuff and growing up and going through the world that makes this interesting to me.
I can't speak for the future tense because I don't know yet, but although I find all Final Fantasy VII as a whole way more just I like it more than Trails just because of its erraticness and its artistry and its lack of artistry. But I honestly find Joshua a way more interesting character than Cloud. But I don't know. I don't know if they're going to live up to that or not.
All right. So those were our two questions from listeners. But since it's the end of the year, it's the start of the year when this comes out, but it's the 30th as we're recording this. So I'm going to ask my co-hosts a question, and I will also answer it myself. But in this past year, what games were the most important to you or had the most impact on you?
Oh, I forgot this was going to be a question. Don't worry,
okay,
I have a doc. I'm going to go look for it.
Well, you go look for your doc, because I think I can do this off the top of my head. So, the only 2015 release game I think that I've played in 2015 is Tales of Systeria.
Is it 2015 only?
No.
No. I'm starting with that one because that's the obvious place to start. The only game that meets those criteria that would go on an ordinary Game of the Year list is Tales of Systeria, which very quickly went into my top 3 games I've ever played.
If we're starting with 2015 games, I I actually I was very much moved by We Know the Devil, and that's a very fantastic game that came out in 2015. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Anyway, so Tales of Systeria wins like actual game of the year for me by default, but also because I love it. I played through the entire Tales series and would recommend almost all of them, but particularly Xillia 2, very affecting. Tales of Vesperia obviously is the game I've decided to basically write a book on, so I've spent a lot of time with that game this year. And I'm going to throw in Kingdom Hearts Re-Chain of Memories, the PS2 remake of the Game Boy game, because when we did Kingdom Hearts, I finished Kingdom Hearts, several people told me that I didn't need to bother with Chain of Memories, and I'm really glad that I did, even though I've now got myself into a point where I'm right near the end of the game, and I've been playing it wrong, and I've got this far, and the way I've been playing it wrong now means that I'm probably not going to be able to complete the game. I'm going to have to start again. But the way that game deals with its themes of solipsism and video game spaces existing purely for the player and memory and the connection between people, I wanted to get into that in a big way in 26. Like, I'm going to do some extended work on that game in the coming year because I think it's really interesting and really rich. So I think that's my list. Oh, and Escapegoat 2 for just being a really polished, neat game that feels great to move through. Leroy?
So I don't really watch movies or anime, or I don't read a lot. I should read more. I read a lot of articles, but I don't read a lot of novels or anything. So I play a lot of games, and I can probably go on and on about this. So I just like, how much time do I have?
Go for it.
Go for it. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm also kind of writing a game of the year list, which is going to have these games as well. So I think I'll try to be more abridged and kind of pick. Okay. Pathologic is a game that I hold, maybe not near and dear, but I hold in very high esteem. For the thing about Pathologic that always is going to stick out to me is at the beginning of the game, the tutorial characters talk to you, the player, over the protagonist who's also speaking, but they're getting talked over to you, the player, and the protagonist will comment on that, and they'll be ignored. And there's a theater in the town of Pathologic, which is an actual artifice, and you'll see characters, all the NPCs on stage, act out what's going to happen that day in the town, but they're all acting as, actors, right? And so Pathologic is really confident of its artifice, and it's like kind of given me an incredible tool set of how I look at JRPGs and video games as, kind of meaning making and being an actor in kind of like a propped up place. And I finished Pathologic in 2015, but I started for the first time in 2013. It's a very difficult game to play through because you need to manage, you have to just like live. You have to survive, which is a very real take on the sort of walk around and talk to people in the town game. And yeah, it's a very desperate game and very difficult, but I really recommend it if you can put up with obtuse systems. Dead Rising was a game I played, and I was...
Sorry, Dead Rising was a game.
Dead Rising was a game. Okay. I honestly expected nothing from Dead Rising. I played it because I played Project X Zone and I found Frank's a fuckboy, but I found him really funny and entertaining, and I was like, I want to see what this game is. I want to see what Dead Rising is. And I played Dead Rising, and I was like, whoa, this game's stupid, because that's what Dead Rising wants you to think, and that's how Dead Rising is advertised, and that's when you're playing it. None of the cutscenes are put together very well. All the dialogue is very canned and corny, but then it starts to betray itself. I feel like they're aware of this corny dialogue. It's like when a B movie starts to become self-aware of itself, and it starts to have a lot of callbacks. But then it goes even deeper and even harder into these themes where the zombies that are wandering around the mall. So it's like a literal shopping mall where people, it's an actual functional mall that has tons of useless things because it's a mall, and there's all these zombies walking about. The zombies came about because America was trying to industrialize faster and faster, and they messed up, and it mutated into zombies. But then it came from out of nowhere in a very cornball comedic game, like the scathing critique of modern consumerism and capitalism, and a very tense and survival minded game. when you play Dead Rising, you think, or what comes to you is that you need to go and kill these zombies, right? Like, what else you're going to do in Dead Rising? But the Dead Rising is on a constant timer. So the time you spend just killing zombies, you will probably fail the mission and the entire game and have to reload your last save. It's very punishing. And so Dead Rising itself, like, rejects its hedonism of its own structure. It's saying you can't kill these zombies. We made them here to give, so you can feel good killing the zombies in this mall. But you can't participate in them all. You can't have fun in them all, or you will lose sight of the truth. And I was like, wow, that actually works very well. And it's partly because I expected nothing out of Dead Rising that I was so impressed by it, but I came out of it just like actually a little bit changed. I was like, wow, that it kind of just like convinced me of some of my own beliefs. And it was Dead Rising. Danganronpa 2. And Danganronpa has a reputation like Undertale for its awful fan base, which is awful. And I'll skip to the end of Danganronpa 2 because you kind of know if Danganronpa is going to work or not for you. It's a very cynical game. Its themes are despair, and it makes it very clear that it's about despair. And it works really hard to instill despair, but at the end of Danganronpa 2, it smashes the fourth wall, and it goes really postmodern and metatextual, and it kind of renounces. It's not about despair anymore either. It's kind of just like, this is a video game, and what do you want out of video games? What do you want out of this thing? What do you want out of the time you're spending? And so for that reason, I found Danganronpa 2 like through it's hard to explain because the fiction's so complex, but with Nagito's character and the way Danganronpa 2 ends, I found it like just way stronger and way more compelling than another game I liked, The Beginner's Guide, for just like kind of shaking me a little bit in 2015 and just like asking me where are video games going? What do you think about them? And I'm always thinking about that. Well, another game, I'll do 2 more games. Edgeworth Investigations 2 is a incredibly long game. It's about 50 hours because of just a massive amount of text. And it's kind of a piecemeal collection of all the other Ace Attorney games, so it's not really interesting or even relevant if you haven't played the entire series. So it's actually a bad game to recommend or even really talk about. In Edgeworth 2, Miles Edgeworth stops being an attorney completely. He is stripped of his ability to be attorney because he stays true to his convictions so much that he's no longer acting like a prosecutor anymore. He's no longer acting true to what his character is supposed to be doing. He's no longer acting true to the video game anymore, and he stops being an attorney, and then he's left in a jail cell, and he's just reflecting on everything he's done. And at the end of the reflection, Edgeworth says, well, I wouldn't trade this. I would do this again. And I was like, wow, that's cool. That just meant a lot to me. The most important game I played in 2015 was Yumi Nikki, for countless of reasons. But I recommend you read the piece I'm going to put in 2016 to actually get why I love Yumi Nikki. But Yumi Nikki kind of, like, if I'm going to say it this way in a boastful way, it blows the hinges off 2D RPG top-down world design. It shows multitudes of potential and possibility that I've never been able to see before in a video game. And it came out in 2004, just like Trails in the Sky. And I played Yumi Nikki, and I see we have a lot of catching up to do. We have a lot of things to consider and places to go. And Yumi Nikki gave me hope for what I'm doing as an artist, a little, because I'm doing things more abstractly, but like you can pull it all together and make it work. And Yumi Nikki's incredible, and I think if there's any game you haven't played, you should play. I think Yumi Nikki is definitely a game you should at least try. You don't have to finish Yumi Nikki. It works just by trying and playing it a little bit. And sorry, it's Yumi Nikki, but I'm a gaijin. Yeah, and that's the end. I'll pick those.
All right. I guess this is my turn.
Mm-hmm.
So my year kind of started off well and then started doing its wobbly nonsense, and I had a kind of major depressive episode in February, and basically the only major reason I recovered other than the support of my friends is that I finished Tales of the Abyss, and the protagonist, Luke, has a line that just made me feel like living. So that was fun. The line in question is, "It doesn't matter if you accept me or not. Here I am alive." And yeah, that was, hearing someone else say that was a saving grace.
It's like, Abyss is a good game.
Abyss is a good game, and I'm kind of sad that it's really hard to get a hold of. But yeah, Tales of the Abyss was a game that I tried a few times to get into, but never really gave a proper shot until this year. And I mainly just kept with it because I had nothing better to do that I felt like doing. And it ended up being one of my favorite games of the last 3 or 4 years that I played. I'm trying to think of what I played this year. Tales of Zestiria is obviously also on there because it's a really good game. And I'm never going to stop saying that. I'm really glad they're using the setting for the next Tales game as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I played Xenoblade Chronicles.
That's like putting Wild Arms on your list.
Well,
Did you almost put Wild Arms on your list, Leroy?
No, well, it's on my dock, but
But yeah, I think just it was important to me in that I know what the general populace thinks is good game design, and there are bits I agree with, but also I don't understand why people will put 90 to 120 hours into that game, but not try like 2 or 3 other games instead with the same time. It's just kind of mind-blowing.
I think the answer to that is people aren't looking. They kind of just want that one game they can familiarize themselves with. Yeah, so that's why AA is so like powerful.
Yeah, it's tiring. I think Wild Arms was also a weird bit of perspective on the genre that was appreciated. And I know there was something else. What did I?
Undertale?
Yeah, Undertale would make the cut, just because it's not revolutionary, but it is good at what it wants to do, and what it wants to do is have very basic standards of compassion for NPCs, which is rare, which is why it's making such a big splash. I've also been working on Final Fantasy XIII thanks to Becky, and after Xenoblade showed me how bloated environmental design can be, having a corridor is nice. And that's a weird thing to have in the year 2015. Yeah.
You know what else you should mention? The game that you've spent a huge amount of time in the second half of this year?
Oh, yeah. That was the other one I was going to mention. So, last year, at the end of the year, I picked up a copy of Final Fantasy XIV on the cheap, and it was not for me. Like, I tried it, I played it with friends, I didn't really get that far into it. For some reason or another, I gave it another shot this year in June or July, and I've been playing it since, and it's really good. And I don't know what happened, but it clicked for me, and it's been nice. I caught up to current content though, and I'm gonna have to take a break because of lacking funds, but it's an MMO that I can appreciate because it's an MMO and also a love letter to the entire Final Fantasy series in a form that a lot of people won't appreciate because it's an MMO, which is the curse.
I don't want to be a downer. I guess I'm being a downer, but I get really cynical about the kind of crossover stuff in 14. And yeah, it's probably my least favorite part. Although the OST is fantastic, and that is a proper love letter to the series.
Oh, I am not going to start singing Ravana's theme right now. Okay. I don't need to start belting out a battle hymn in the middle of this podcast episode. Giant Bugman battle hymn. Thanks for joining us for this episode of DGC. Next month's episode will be about Chrono Cross, a Squaresoft RPG on the PS1 that's a sequel to Chrono Trigger. It's available on the US PlayStation Network for $10. The episode after that will be Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, which is only available to play on GameCube, but it's well known enough that you could probably find an LP or two floating around if you're unfamiliar with it. Join us next time for episode 6 of Dead Genre Chronicles, Project Crossbone.
That hurt a lot more coming out, but it did on paper.
All right. Later, folks. Hi, this is Devin, after editing the podcast, and I just wanted to say thank you for the support. in the creation of Dead Genre Chronicles, and I'd like to keep making new episodes into and through the new year. So I would appreciate it if you could support the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/invisifool. Once we hit $100 a month, I can start guaranteeing we get consistent minisodes out every month. Until then, we're kind of stuck dealing with whatever we can manage. Thank you for listening.